Hello there. Welcome to my podcast. My name is Afnan Ace, and today I want to let you in on how I was hired for roles that I never actually applied for. At a young age, I received my very first job. I was a translator for free. They definitely were not thinking of us children of immigrants when they made all these child labor laws in the United States. Before I learned multiplication or even learned how to form a paragraph, I was explaining emails from my teachers, school forms that needed to be signed, and whatever else was going on at school to my parents. I didn't really see it as a burden at the time, just an early responsibility. Although I was lucky to have older siblings who took on the responsibility earlier on and more than I did. As the years went on, it didn't take me long to realize that I just might be the only student, or at least one out of a few students, to have this responsibility. It made me wonder to myself why things felt so uneven. It seemed like everyone else's parents seemed to understand everything automatically, while mine were still learning alongside me. It wasn't fair in my eyes. It felt like I was constantly running in and out of the doors of my childhood just to keep up with a system that wasn't initially built for families like mine. And that's the part people don't really talk about. How the American education system gives out roles to children of immigrants, shaping us to be translators, advocates, and acting as cultural bridges before we even begin to understand what they mean. These roles made school feel more like a burden for me than it was for other kids. Because I knew my success in school would be tied to the dreams of my parents more than my own. As a first-generation child of immigrants, school always felt more serious, and I know I wasn't alone in this. From a very early age, I was reminded of the struggles my parents faced before coming to this country. They've always made it clear that school wasn't just school, it was a luxury. Not just any school, an American school. I remember my parents often telling me, "We didn't have that back home." And as a child, I never knew how to respond to that. I just knew that school would always have to be the most important thing in my life, and I should be grateful to be getting an education in this country. So before report cards started to come in, I always knew that I was expected to take everything more seriously. As a child, there was no inspiration in that. It was confusing. I didn't understand why I had to prove myself so much. I just got here. Luckily, I've come to understand why my parents pushed so hard, even though it was a pressure that started way too early for a child. I know what I was feeling wasn't just a personal matter. Researchers like Crystal A. George Monge, a professor who studies immigrants and first-generation college students, have shown that there are many immigrant children that experience many of the same challenges as the traditional first-generation student because their parents are unfamiliar with the school system. This confirms what I've always felt. My parents were educated, but not American educated. Their degrees from back home didn't help them understand how to navigate the school system I would be brought up in. Because of that, I was faced with challenges similar to students of families that were not given the necessary tools to navigate through the American education system. This left me in a position where I had to discover and figure things out on my own and then teach it to my parents. Ever since that responsibility settled in, school started to feel heavy. It felt like a responsibility that only I had to carry, and I was faced with the realization that my peers who didn't look like me wouldn't understand, which I do believe to be true. Another study done by sociologists at the University of Wisconsin-Madison has revealed that children of immigrants have higher educational expectations than their counterparts from native-born families. Of course. Parents like mine have crossed oceans and borders just to give us a better chance at life than they ever had. And for them, that starts with education. My parents walked into a country without realizing that their efforts wouldn't be valued. Yet they still chose to raise children who would contribute to this country. Every bit of hope they carried from their baggage would end up on my shoulders before I could even begin to understand why things had to be that way. Now, I can say that I've come to understand that it wasn't just about what my parents wanted for me. It was about this role I had to grow into, the role that would become the roadmap to my success, in the same place where some would view me as incapable of success because I'm the first, or rather, what they assume to be the first. After all, America, as we know it, wouldn't be America without anyone migrating here in the first place. To be the first meant becoming my own advocate. My parents have always laid out their expectations, but not the specifics. Of course I knew school mattered, even if it mattered more to my parents than me at the time. But my parents didn't realize that what mattered to me was often swept under the rug. I remember watching my peers walk around with money their parents gave them during the school book fairs every year while I was empty-handed. I could only look at the things I wanted to buy. The jumbo pencils, the fidget squishies, the pretty bookmarks, all the things a child should be able to enjoy. See, it wasn't because my parents didn't care. It was because I knew they wouldn't understand what a book fair even was. I could already hear the, "We didn't have that back home," before the words could even leave my mouth. Looking back now, I wish I could have found the words to explain myself, to advocate for myself. Again, I know I'm not alone in this matter. Researchers Ron Haskins and Marta Tienda found that many immigrant students struggle because their families are unfamiliar with how the American school system operates. And while I can't say I struggled with the class material, since I was quite a fast learner, it was the speaking up for myself that I found difficult. How could I possibly tell my parents it wasn't the schoolwork that I needed help with, but rather the parts about school that they've never experienced, like the book fairs? That I learned over the years, thankfully. We eventually came to this common ground. It definitely made things easier, but that didn't change my reality. Another study from the University of Wisconsin-Madison adds that children of immigrants face systematic disadvantages compared to their native-born peers, not only in academics, but in everyday expectations placed on them. And it sounds dramatic, but this really was a part of the quiet obstacles I had to face. We had to face. I had to understand that if I didn't speak up for myself, no one else could do it for me. This meant opening up to my parents without coming off as defying them in their parenting style. Being able to advocate for myself wasn't something that would come naturally to me. It was yet another role I was forced into that I didn't quite understand. Unfortunately, that wasn't the last role I would grow into. There would be a lot of ground to cover to be able to come to a common ground with my parents. I had to learn to be the bridge between my life at home and school. I was navigating between two worlds while trying my best to keep up with both standards. Even though both expected me to do my best, it wasn't that simple at home. At school, teachers allowed room for errors and mistakes because they are acceptable, whereas my parents demanded the absolute best at all times. This was simply because they couldn't understand why I couldn't always be perfect, considering all the resources I have compared to them when they were in school. Psychologists who study immigrant youth at the University of Harvard explain that having this kind of balance places additional emotional and mental demands on students, even though studies also show that many of us do develop strong academic resilience because of this. It sounds confusing, but the more I think about it now, the more I realize how that resilience shaped who I am, long before I understood why these rules and expectations were laid out in front of me. There's a saying my parents would always tell me in Somali that I still hear to this day. Wainan Wanaksan. It directly translates to older goodly head. The idea that with age comes a better, wiser head on the shoulders. I honestly never understood that as a child, but it couldn't be any clearer now. After years of being a translator, advocating for myself, and acting as a bridge between my immigrant household and school, I can finally understand what my parents meant. Indeed, with age came clarity. Clarity about myself, my identity, and the purpose of everything I had to experience under the pressure of my parents. And for that, I am grateful.